Alright, this is for Eric and Anna. Hey Tony, it's good to see you. How is today?
Still living the fucking dream, Nora. How about you?
Yeah, I hear ya. I don't mean to brag, but I totally got out of bed today. Welcome to Totally Got Out of Bed, a podcast to support people who've lost a loved one to suicide and the people who support them. I'm Nora Flum, and I lost my son Eric to suicide on January 3rd, 2018.
And I'm Tony Plant. I lost my daughter Anna to suicide on January 30th of 2016.
This is episode 3, probably part 1. Like I said before, we're kind of new to this, and we kind of think that we've got one full episode, but we talk a lot, so it's probably going to be 2. So this is part 1, or all, of episode 3. What's happening to my life? It's our goal in this episode to talk about getting through the first few days after the funeral, and it's our hope that in doing so, we can provide you with some tools for your grief toolbox, some ways to help you get through this nightmare you find yourself in.
The first few days and weeks is when it all really sunk in, the reality of everything. All of a sudden, mostly everyone's gone. And the people have to go back to work. Of course they do. People have lives to lead and things to do. And I was left alone with my own brain to lead me in whatever direction it chose. That's not always a good thing, as you can imagine. Sometimes it meant solitude and peace and quiet and good things. But sometimes it meant fear and obsession and anger and, of course, loneliness and sorrow.
Yeah, I remember a sense both of loss and of relief when people left. I as an introvert, I need time alone to process what happens to me, and the first few weeks I didn't have any moment to myself. It felt like I could not deal with my feelings, and so when people left, I felt, both the good and the bad of finally dealing with getting on with my life the way it was going to be, and it was terrible. It was just terrible. For us, Eric was an adult, and Eric lived in Chicago, and he owned a condo, and that was where he died. So we almost immediately had to go to Chicago just to see the space and look for a will or anything legal that we might have to deal with. And we had to get his snake. He had a ball python named Esther, and we had to find a home for her. So we got there, and we, saw the scene and just looked through the stuff. We didn't stay. We didn't take anything except, well, we took a few things back that first trip, but got the snake, got a few things, got anything legal that we could find, and that was it. And then we came back. And I remember at that point I was, one of the coping mechanisms I used was journaling. I had started a journal. I talked about having been in Guatemala when I got the news, and I had, as almost an afterthought, thrown in the journal into my suitcase. And I had started it on December 31st of 2017 as kind of a New Year's Eve project, as a way to start journaling, and while I was away at peace and quiet and just kind of on a retreat. It was a mission trip, but it was kind of a retreat, so I started journaling. Yeah, and then it became a grief journal, and it became a way for me to cope. It was called an art therapy journal, and it just had pages to color, and so I had colored pencils, and I was coloring and writing, and that was how I made it through the first few weeks and first few months, honestly. I didn't go back to work right away. My administration was wonderful. My principal told me to take as much time as I needed, even if it meant the rest of the year. And I know not everybody gets that kind of support, but I am so grateful. And my sister at this time gave me great advice. She said, take as much time as you need, but not as much time as you want.
That's good advice. Have something to think about. Really got to weigh it to go back. I went back to work about 2 weeks after Anna died. I wasn't able to focus at all, but I go through the motions of what I needed to do, and I just did what I could. I had been at that company for almost 20 years, so I had a good history with them, and they were extremely accommodating as well, just like Nora. I mean, so lucky. I can't imagine having a company that would have said, you have to come back and get work done or something, because that would have just been, I wouldn't have been able to. That's it.
And I think we need to know that there are people out there that can't have that. You don't want a doctor to go back to work thinking that they're only there at 50%, or So we
Right.
know that there are people out there who have to go back at 100%. And oh God, if that's your story, my heart goes out to you, man, because grief brain is a thing. We know that it's harder to
Hmm.
concentrate, it's harder to keep our minds focused, and it is really a privilege to be in an environment where people get that.
Totally. And because I'd been there 20 years, and probably same with you, Nora, I don't know, but those were my people there. They were
Yeah.
the people that like knew me best and had been around through everything, in my life for the past 20 years. So it was good for me to be at work. And I would have gone crazy at home. I don't know what I would have done. The worst thing that happened to me when I was at work was that people I didn't know very well might give me the look. That one that says, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's the woman whose daughter killed herself."
Oh,
And so, and you just, I don't know how you get over that, but I just learned to like whatever, think what you want. And once again, some people would actually ask me to respond to. They'd ask me, how are you doing? That great question. And of course, that's when I came up and always used my live in the fucking dream.
yeah. I remember when
Because
people
that
would
shut them up.
yeah, that would imagine. I remember my standard response when people would say, "Oh, how are you doing?" I just said no. Like I can't even go there. I
Yeah.
can't even respond to that. Now I did learn one technique. A friend, my counselor friend, doesn't ask how are you. He just says how is today, which I find a relief because I can be different every day. I can be different minute to minute, but how is today is a much more appropriate question. I find.
Yep, I totally agree. Like, how are you doing right this minute? Even would be okay.
Yeah, right.
But how is today is a little bit, flows a little better. And I was really lucky at that time because we still had our meal support option. And I think that they put it together, like whoever did it, I think it might have been one of my son's friends put this together. And I think they made it last for like 6 weeks.
Oh,
And I don't think if we hadn't had that, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have eaten
oh, totally.
because it was just we didn't think about it, or maybe just a lot of toast. I mean, that was pretty
Oh,
much it.
oh, yeah, whatever you could find. I think I had a lot of nachos. But yeah,
Right.
but yeah, I think yeah, my colleagues at work also put together a meal chain, and I think that lasted for almost 2 months. They didn't give us a choice. They just said this is coming, and this is when it's showing up. And again, I wouldn't have thought to eat. I certainly wouldn't have paid any attention to nutrition. And sometimes I only ate because I didn't want their food to go to waste.
And I remember in those first few weeks also, when you weren't crying, you would think of other things you could do, like maybe should I be going through her stuff? Should I be looking at stuff? But there were some things I just couldn't do, and one of them was I couldn't go in her room. So she was 15, so her room was right there. It was right by ours, and I had to keep the door shut because I did. But she frequently kept her door shut because she didn't like the dogs going in there. Look, getting her teddy bears or whatever, getting her stuffed animals because we have one dog who likes to carry around stuffed animals. So her door was frequently shut. So I couldn't go in there. It just was too hard for me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because some people that I've heard since then, like in our suicide support group, have said that all they wanted to do was lay in their room
Yeah.
and lay on their bed
Yeah.
and sleep in their room and be as close to them as they could. I couldn't
Yeah.
do that at all.
Yeah, no, when we went to Chicago, the second time when we had to clean out his stuff, I remember I just lay in his bed for the longest time and just sobbed right in his bed. Yeah, going through this stuff is hard. Thank God we had the help of his friends. One of his good friends came over and spent a lot of time with us. We had to pack everything up and move everything, so we had a U-Haul and boxes, and we didn't know what to do with this stuff. And we decided that we weren't going to pack up and bring home his clothes. That would be something that we just didn't want to have to deal with. And thank goodness his friend knew where Eric would want his clothes donated, so he took all of those. My son John kept the ties, but they were different body types, so nothing else of Eric's would have fit him. Yeah, but everything else we just boxed up, put in the U-Haul, and dumped in our basement, and it is largely still there 3 years later. We haven't gone through it. We've given a few pieces of furniture away to other family relatives or, other household appliances or things that people might need, but otherwise it's still there. And, I know that I'll go through it sometime. It will feel natural and it will feel right, but right now I still can't.
Oh, I hear you. And what we did, somebody actually told me this at our suicide support group. just get, if you need to, for whatever reason, just get a couple of really big plastic bins like you put Christmas decorations in, and just box all your stuff up in there. And so that's what I did. We actually sold our house 2 years after she died, and we moved. And so I just boxed everything up in these plastic bins, and they are still there. So it's been almost 5 years, and they're in my new basement in a closet. Occasionally I take some out. Anna collected Beanie Babies. And so when someone that she knows or we know that would have a relationship with Anna has a baby, I give them one of her Beanie Babies. And I just feel like that's a nice way. So yeah, try to make sure that everybody has something of her. We did that at first a little bit too, not just with the Beanie Babies, but some of them, with some of her clothes and stuff, with her friends and her cousins. So, but for the most part, we have it all also. Yep. I don't know if I'll ever go through it, Nora. That's a good question. Maybe when I die, my son will have to go through it. I don't know. It's not the right time yet, though. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
There's a couple other things I absolutely could not do. And one of those was go to Target without sobbing. I mean, I had to go to Target occasionally. That's where I do all my shopping, because we have, that's just our store. And Anna really liked going to Target from the time she was just teeny. So going there at first was really hard for me, especially on Friday nights, which was weird. But for whatever reason, my husband was in the food and beverage business, so frequently he was gone on Friday nights, and Anna would go with me there. And so for whatever reason, I just couldn't do that. And of course, I couldn't talk about the whole thing, her whole death, without sobbing at first. It was like crying was constant, and thinking about it was constant. It's like at first, it's like you never didn't think about it, I think. Right. It was the first thing I thought about first thing in the morning, and it was the last thing I thought about when I went to bed, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd be thinking about it. Matter of fact, I think I remember the first time I woke up in the morning when I wasn't thinking about it, and that only lasted like 5 seconds, because I remember thinking about it and then going like, wow, it wasn't the first thing I thought of this morning. And that was like a few years in, so. And there just was so many firsts those first few weeks. Like the first time at church, it was so difficult. I sobbed the whole time. It's like crazy. Just the music and all the people there that just are so caring, and they would just, I don't know. There was, just for me, and I don't know anybody else feels about this, but my church is just a fabulous, welcoming community that just, Anna would go to church a lot with me when she was alive on Saturdays at 5. And so those people, were there with her from the time she had grown up, and she wasn't there anymore. And clearly they all knew that it had happened. So, you just cry.
Yeah.
But good thing I didn't care what any of the rest of them thought.
Our story is similar. My husband is the pastor of the church. We're at a different church now, but the community just surrounded us and upheld us, and it was both wonderful and terrible to be going through this with those kinds of people in the kind of position that we're in as pastor. You'd think that this doesn't happen to pastors' families, but that's one thing we've learned. It can happen to anybody. Mm-hmm. You said that Anna had a history of mental health issues and mental health challenges, and Eric did not. So no one is immune, and I am very sorry about that. No one is immune, and it happens to nice people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember before I went back to school as a teacher, I decided it was important for me to at least kind of desensitize myself to the situation. So I asked a former colleague, who was now a full-time stay-at-home mom, if she would come back and go in and have lunch with me at work with our colleagues, and she was glad to. People are wonderful. People are glad to set their lives aside and come and support you when loss is new. So yeah, she came with me, and I had tears in my eyes the whole time. It was so hard. And I remember sitting at the lunch table across from a very dear friend. I love this woman. And she looked at me in all sincerity and said, "Oh God, how are you?" And I lost my breath. I could not speak. I had nothing. And thank God my friend who was sitting next to me acted as my interpreter. She said, yeah, she's just barely holding it together. I didn't have words. You can't answer that. Mm-hmm.
And because you teach at a Catholic school, you didn't want to say live in the fucking dream. Just kidding.
I could have,
Oh,
though. I could have. I've got
yeah.
one
I
of
mean,
Ollie. Yeah.
anything's when you're in this
I
situation, believe me, nobody expects a lot and they shouldn't.
Yeah, and I think I did know you at the time, so I did have that in my vernacular at the time, but I couldn't come up with it.
So hard. It's just so important that you have those people around you that can like just answer for you. I mean,
Hmm.
she knew that you needed that. She knew that you needed to tell the rest of the people that, and she was able to answer for you.
Yep.
So, about that same time though, I will say that I also started reading everything I can find, and Nora mentioned, I think in the last episode or something, that I'm just this wealth of information. Here's the problem with that statement. I read a lot, but I also have grief brain. So then it goes out the other side. So I do read a lot, and I might remember that for a few minutes, even a week. But after that, a lot of it might be gone. So I'm not saying I'm a wealth of information, let me tell you. But I did start reading everything I could, and because people had given us some books, but there's not that many written about suicide. But I also found some others, and it was really helpful for me. I just needed to hear that I wasn't crazy, that other people who had gone through this felt the same. They felt the same kind of obsession with how their child had died and what they had been feeling before they died. So I needed to find out as much about that as I could, because that sort of haunted me from the very beginning. Like that, it was like, what must she have been thinking when that happened? And so there are some books written about, like either books and videos done about people who died by suicide and what they might have been feeling at the last minute, like maybe they lived through it. They didn't actually die, but they attempted it. And we'll get into that in another episode. But to me, that was really important. I also really wanted to honor Anna in any way that I could. And to me, that just meant like she loved the color red. So I just bought everything red. Okay, so I need to get a new shirt. I'll get a red shirt. I need to get new shoes. I'll get red shoes. And really, it was everything that I bought. Um, we also painted our front door red. We painted a lot of outdoor furniture red. We did everything in red that we could. The other thing that she loved was smiley faces. And so from the time she was little, she had this little stuffed animal that was like a smiley face. It looked like an M&M, but it was yellow. So it looked like a smiley face with feet and arms. And so she called it her Bubba face, but basically it was a smile face. And so somebody brought 1,000 or so of those to the funeral, those little pins, like smile face pins, and handed them out. And we still actually do hand them out. And we've had to buy a few more batches of them. But just that kind of thing to just sort of keep her alive. And now it's interesting. People even send me now when they see a smiley face on something, and I know that they'll send me a picture of it. And, it's just nice. We always think it's Anna. Like when we see a cardinal, it's red, and it's Anna. And when we see a smiley face, it's Anna.
Yeah. For me, Eric's favorite color was purple. So when I need a little uh, Eric uplifting, I wear purple. And it was rainbows. Eric was gay. He was a gay man, and pride was an important symbol for him. So the rainbow was an important symbol. And also, we are, as Christians, the rainbow symbol of new promise. Eric had a deep faith, and he believed in new promise. Um, anyway, his friends ordered rainbow bracelets with "In Memory of Eric Flum" for his funeral. So I have one of those. And a third Eric symbol is owls. Eric loved owls, and he had a few owl figurines. And so now every time I see owls or I hear an owl, I like to think that it's Eric just giving me a little nudge saying hi. Those symbols are important. And
They really are.
And they're comforting.
They bring you hope.
Yep. Yep.
Another thing that happened for me in the first month, actually, I think it was about 3 weeks later, after Anna's death. It was still February, so she died end of January, so it was still in February. A reporter from a local TV station called me, and she wanted to do a piece for the news. And I immediately said yes, because I sort of learned right away to say yes, because it doesn't really matter how you perform. It just really matters that you say yes and tell the story. So, as I just really wanted people to know Anna's story and to know that we were like a normal family, whatever in the hell that means. the reporter then came to our house and interviewed me about Anna and about her struggles and her death, and it was really painful, but it was really good. But I know I said a lot of things that were probably like mental health inaccurate or wrong by mental health standards, just in the way I was wording things. But I still don't regret it. Just for her, Anna's sake, and her legacy, I just felt like I need to say yes to all these kinds of things and get it out there that suicide happens in the very best of families. It's not just for dysfunctional or abnormal families. It's for like totally normal families that have jobs and go to work and just are normal. And I was just desperate to tell the world that if it can happen to our little middle class, sweet little family, it could happen to them. And so I kind of made sure that I did that as often as I could for everyone that I could.
Yeah, that stigma is so striking. The idea that, we must have been horrible parents because our son died by suicide, or we must have done something wrong because our son died by a suicide. That's the stigma. And it is important when we feel ready to try to combat that and say, no, this is something that happens to a wide variety of people, and unfortunately no one is immune.
Absolutely true. So another thing that happened in the first few months for me was that in March, so my birthday's in March, so she died at the end of January. In March, I got a tattoo. And it's an interesting story because I always said that I would only get a tattoo if something had happened to one of my kids. Anna had wanted like 10 tattoos. Thank goodness. Well, I guess it wouldn't have mattered, but when if you're not 18, you can't get a tattoo. So I got one in her honor, and it consists of just her name, followed by a semicolon. Now the semicolon has been used by a lot of people. There was an organization called the Semicolon Project, and the semicolon is described as something that is to be used as a pause. So instead of putting a period at the end of a sentence, you put a semicolon and you pause and continue. Mm-hmm. So it stands for suicide prevention, in that it refers to like how you use it in a sentence. So at the end of a sentence, you would put a period. Like if you were going to end your life, there would be a period. But if you put in a semicolon instead, you will pause and then move on. So it is to be used as a pause in your life instead of an ending to your life. So in my tattoo, I put Anna, semicolon, because the saying that the Semicolon Project has is, my story isn't over yet. So what this tattoo says for me is, her story isn't over yet. And it reminds me to talk about mental health issues and suicide prevention.
And with that, we've got to go to This Episode Isn't Over Yet, but this will be the end of part 1. Remember that if you or someone you love is in danger, please call 911 or go to the nearest emergency room. If you need to talk, you can call 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. The Lifeline is a free, confidential crisis hotline that's available to everyone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or you can text HELLO to 741-741. That's a crisis text hotline that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the United States. The crisis text line serves anyone in any type of crisis. Stay tuned for part 2 of episode 3, where we continue to talk about the takeaways of what we learned during the first few days after our children died.
And many thanks to our extremely talented team, Wendy Wolf, our tech guru, Monica Lavorsi, the composer and performer behind our theme song, and a special thanks to Survivor Resources, the group that continues to support us and others in the wake of our tragedies. Thank you for listening today, and please join us next time with the conclusion of episode 3.
In the meantime, smile when you can and cry when you have to.
Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now and be as one. The colors start to fade. Gray is the only shade that you see now. Lost in the charade of the journeyman's parade, can't see a way out. As you keep marching onward, oh, all you gotta do is reach out and hold my hand now. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now and be as one. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand. The tracks begin to sway. You're in the middle of the fray, so hold on tight now. Your grip begins to slip. You tumble towards the lip of the open tray.